Fans ran from him, opponents all over the world feared him. He left a trail of blood, violence, and dollars across multiple territories, multiple continents, from 1958 through the 90s into the 2000s. The madman from Sudan, he never had to talk. His violence spoke volumes. As Mick Foley said, he was truly a nightmare come to life. I'm John Renton with my review, Dark Side of the Ring, Abdullah the Butcher, Legacy of Blood. So let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments, please, because I'm going to tell you right now, if you think this is going to be a positive review, ho, 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 no. Let me say right now that I've never been a big fan of hardcore, bloodthirsty wrestling. I recognize that it has an audience, and Abdullah the Butcher truly was one of the pioneers of it. I mean, if you think about him and the original Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher and Carlos Colon, the guy that covered up the murder perpetrated by Jose Gonzalez against Bruiser Brody. Carlos Colon will never, ever, ever live that down. And I hope he suffers mightily for the fact that he let that happen. But anyway, I was never a fan of Abdullah the Butcher's work. Even looking back on, there's no doubt that being in multiple territories and making appearances and not getting stale and having multiple places to go, he would draw big money because you didn't see through the fact that he couldn't really goddamn work, but he didn't need to work because at that time he was huge, literally and figuratively, and the fact is he would scare people. You would see the footage of fans running from him in multiple territories, multiple countries. People would just say, "Oh fuck it, we don't want to be around that guy." And he was successful. He was hated. The talking heads were pretty good, except for one. I knew they were going to include him. Devin Nicholson, Hannibal, that piece of goddamn human waste that deserved every bad thing that happened to him. Let me just say that right now. Abdullah was loved by some, hated by others, but he did certainly draw promoters a lot of goddamn money because he was basically just violence incarnate. Mick Foley, it was great to actually hear from Mick Foley here, who truly is one of the nicest guys in professional wrestling. He did work with Abdullah briefly in 1991. I mean, to be quite honest, that team actually worked pretty well, especially considering that Abdullah was over 30 years into his career by that point and was 50. He was born in 1941, so he was 50 when he appeared in WCW. Hugo Savinovich, who didn't really bother to look at the camera, kept looking up and everything. And oh wait, no, Hugo would never do that kind of stuff. Hugo, who is one of the best and most energetic, announcers, commentators for wrestling. I mean, seriously, it's great, but just look up Hugo Savinovich and look up some pictures, especially of like him calling stuff in Mexico or, for Mexican promotions. It's a little bit of powder just nearby or whatever, almost like he needed a little bit of a boost. Seriously, the guy was friggin' high as a goddamn kite. Anyway, his family chimed in, and look, I feel for the family because they had to grow up in a house that was not in great shape. 2 bedrooms, there were 8 people there. The mother would scrub floors, work really hard. The dad would work really hard. And Larry Shreve, Abdullah the Butcher, he ain't moving all that well. Well, he's also, I think this was filmed last year, but still, he was 81 at the time this was filmed. He's 82 now. He hasn't been moving all that well. He really, he was just finding ways to make money. He did not have a very high education, apparently. He did not learn to read or write, which gets questioned a little bit later on. He had businesses, would work for people. He would move stuff for people. He taught old people how to do karate, old women how to do karate. They ran through a lot of shit. The original Sheik, making Detroit wrestling his home, the Kobo. Him and Abdullah worked well together. Abdullah started in 1958. He was 17 years old. And there's no doubt that seeing somebody Abdullah's size and who could move, he for a time could move pretty goddamn well. And then he got to just where he was the size of a goddamn Buick. It was massive. But he would frighten people. He could work with anybody the one time because he would put the fear of God in people because you just look at him. Nobody looked like that. And it was cool to see the old Japanese footage and the old Detroit footage and world-class footage and all that. It was really, really nice to see that stuff. I did feel for the family. I did feel for the family having to grow up in that stuff. Carlos Colon made Hugo Savinovich a manager. He managed Abdullah. And Abdullah was already really popular by this point. Tony Atlas talks about how, well, the violence was the main selling point with Abdullah, and he would make you fear him, and that Abdullah made sure that when he was making money, that his family was taken care of, made sure his mom didn't have to work another day in her life, and I believe that. I do believe that. I do believe that Abdullah would make sure that his family was taken care of. Unfortunately, now he's in bad physical and financial shape because he didn't save his money. I'm not saying he was frivolous, but he didn't save his money, and also there are a few legal troubles that come up a little bit later that might explain it. Or maybe he truly just wasn't as penny pinching as he should have been. So, Gary Hart was perfect for Abdullah. Manage him in world class. I mean, Gary Hart, one of the most underappreciated managers of all time. I meant to read his book. God, I meant to read his book, and now the copies of the book are just insane. His caregiver, Jocelyn, Larry said, or Abdullah said another name. She's his caregiver, met him while she was feeding the homeless and everything, and she seemed like a really down-to-earth person. Had a son that, they went to the restaurant, and he's like, don't you know who that is? That's Abdullah the Butcher. The kid knowing who Abdullah the Butcher was probably meant that he found somebody that had a whole lot of tapes, or maybe the internet or whatever. It's like, oh my God, Abdullah the Butcher. He had a restaurant, and he couldn't read or write. I'm not saying that he put all that shit together, but really? Never taught himself how to read or write? So, the montage of people that he worked with, Terry Funk, all the way Giant Baba, he was really over in Japan, because especially in Japan at that point with All Japan, New Japan, they took wrestling fucking seriously. And Baba working with Abdullah, that would have been money, because Baba at that point could still somewhat move. Rest in peace, Giant Baba. But he recorded an album, he was in movies, he was in, I gotta watch that movie that he was in. That just looks so badly dubbed and so ridiculous. He was in video games. He had to have been the inspiration for King Hippo. There's no fucking way he couldn't have been. Devin, Nicholson, Hannibal, this piece of shit, this freaking goddamn liar, this scam artist, this fucking moron, this guy that apparently was so upset because his contract with WWE, got rescinded because he tested positive for Hep C, which probably was true, but yeah, more on that a little bit later. Great North Wrestling, all stuff. They skipped over so much of Abdullah's career. I would like to have seen more about the career and less about the scandal stuff, even though the scandal's a big part of it as far as him being in financial ruin. The I Like to Hurt People footage, that was from, I believe, Detroit Wrestling. It wasn't released until 1985, and Detroit Wrestling shut down in 81 officially. And then Hannibal shows how to blade. Like, this guy knew what to fucking do in a goddamn ring. Look at the footage of him working with Heidenreich. When Heidenreich's the better of the two workers, yeah, maybe you weren't fucking cut out for this. Mush-mouth piece of shit. Abdullah used blades and a fork. That's why I never considered him a wrestler, because it was dumb. I mean, yes, it worked for a while, but then just looking back on it, it was just garbage. And now you got people doing that stuff thinking, oh, I'm going to be like Abdullah. Abdullah can make it work, even if I didn't care for Abdullah. And then Vince wouldn't sign him. I wonder why. And then there was footage from like 2009, this show called Roger's Daytime, that honest to God, the footage looked like it was from like 1991, 92, but nevertheless. Hannibal signed with WWE, got routine blood tests, and it turned out he got hepatitis C from a match where, where Abdullah had used blades and reused blades and stuff like that, never cleaned them apparently, and I'm sure he's not the only one, but ended up stabbing him, hitting him with a couple things or whatever, and it was that Abdullah had hepatitis C and gave it to Hannibal. The thing is, though, Hannibal had been working with Abdullah for a while, doing all this stuff, doing all this hardcore stuff, and bleeding in other matches, according to this footage that I saw. And you're telling me that Abdullah was the one that gave him that, and maybe it wasn't just Hannibal's own shit? Maybe it was Hannibal's problem. I'm not saying that Abdullah didn't give him that. But the fact that Hannibal blames Abdullah for this when he was a journeyman wrestler that really wasn't very goddamn good. I mean, WWE want to take a look at him. WWE had fucking Heidenreich, and they had a lot of other people. They really weren't all that goddamn good and cut out, but they at least were going to feature them. And a guy named Hannibal or Devin Nicholson, not even Devin Storm, not even Crowbar's real name. Hannibal blamed Abdullah, the footage of the 2007 match, and then his caregiver shows how his house is in total disarray. Really, really bad. And I feel he doesn't have money to pay for it. And I feel for that, because the guy shouldn't be living in squalor, especially if he did take care of his family. Maybe his family should try to find a way to take care of him, just saying. But Abdullah had gotten all these letters, and he never had a chance to figure out how to read and write. His caregiver had to read them for him. He didn't show up, so he lost his case in Toronto, and I believe they said Toronto and Georgia. Maybe they even said Ottawa and Georgia also, but it's like, the bottom line is he lost a couple different cases. And Hannibal was awarded $2.3 million. Canadian or US, I don't really give a shit. He didn't deserve a goddamn penny, because I don't believe that Abdullah was really that reckless. I really don't believe he was. And Atlas said he shouldn't have paid him a goddamn thing. The caregiver showing the pictures of the house, it was, again, just really, really traumatizing. Abdullah, he wished that he had studied and stayed in school and stuff like that, but he wanted to make money. And look, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, you should get an education, but he's not the only wrestler to not even come close to graduating high school that managed to make money in wrestling and not save money or whatever. So it's a cautionary tale for sure. At least get a high school education, kids. At least do that. And people took advantage of him. Also, again, I don't think that Abdullah was necessarily the smartest with his money either. Because, yeah, promoters probably took advantage of him. Probably all this stuff and everything. A whole bunch of stuff that wasn't mentioned. Hard for me to really care about a guy that beat himself up physically so goddamn much that by the time he got to WCW when he was 50, he could barely goddamn move. Because he beat up his body because he couldn't ever fucking work. And then the punishment of hardcore wrestling and all this stuff. And the fact that Abdullah never learned how to read. How was he able to sign contracts unless people read them to him? How was he able to have a restaurant? How was he able to read menus? People question that. Am I saying that he can read he can read Moby Dick front and back, or back and front? No, I'm not saying he can do that. I'm not saying he can read backwards and forwards completely or whatever, but I don't fucking believe that somebody at that point wouldn't have been able to learn that. Maybe they just didn't want to. Maybe they wanted to play dumb. Who the hell goddamn knows? Maybe it's just another part of the character. And then the audience, they were all, they still being terrified of him. Like, I mean, seeing still this footage of, like, his career. And then this Hannibal stuff. Let me say right now that Hannibal felt that Abdullah should die. Abdullah should do this. Now, Hannibal, who that is like totally ruined when he was 26, when he got Hep C. Maybe from Abdullah, maybe not. Maybe from his own carelessness. Who knows? Journeyman wrestler that has his life shattered because he couldn't be in WWE. And he's working on the indies. He's being a noted piece of shit. His interview style, I have tried to sit through the Hannibal TV stuff and everything, and the guy seriously sounds like he's having about 5 damn strokes with every sentence. And he is a year younger than I am. He is a year younger than I am. And that ref incident, I don't remember what the name of the promotion was, but the ref, look, it was December of 2021. It's not even 2 years old. If I can take a look at it, I think it was December of 2021. It was later in 2021. But he just starts stabbing a goddamn ref with the spike and beating him up and blading him and everything. And this guy's up, and he felt it was part of the goddamn show. No, he took advantage of this goddamn referee, who may or may not have been known for bleeding and may or may not have done spots like that. But he did it with professionals, not a piece of shit like Hannibal. Lance Storm said he should have been jailed. He shouldn't be allowed to be in wrestling. This was audio from, I believe, the Wrestling Observer podcast. And Lance Storm, anybody whose opinion I'm going to respect as far as a veteran and everything, somebody who gets modern wrestling but also understands old school stuff and how to treat the business seriously, yeah, I'm going to trust Lance goddamn Storm. Next week, Bam Bam Bigelow. Really excited for that one. What is his legacy? Abdullah the Butcher's legacy is a man that will be remembered as being a hardcore wrestler and being somebody that drew a lot of money, got a lot of attention for good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not letting the Hep C thing, black eye his career or whatever. In my opinion, his wrestling style did that. He got inducted in the Hall of Fame in 2011. I believe he sold his ring for medical treatment. Whatever. I mean, he never should have been inducted in WWE Hall of Fame anyway. Not just because he didn't work in WWE, but why? I mean, why? Well, I mean, they inducted Sonny that same year, actually, so I would have rather inducted Abdullah, because at least Abdullah did something positive for wrestling. And Hannibal's a shitbag. Hannibal's a goddamn shitbag. He talks about all these terrible things that happened to him, and then he goes and does that to a referee, negating any sympathy that he may have had. So as far as I'm concerned, he deserves every bit of ridicule that he gets. And also, he's had numerous issues, run-ins with the law in an assault case that I believe happened sometime last year. And other stuff. And run-ins with the law, maybe the problem is you. Devin Nicholson, it's like, Hannibal, you wouldn't even know what an actual Hannibal is. Hannibal Lecter, anybody that's played Hannibal Lecter, somebody that just wears the Hannibal Lecter mask is scarier than he is. He is nothing. The only reason that he's even being talked about in this episode is because people felt the need to mention him. And that's the most attention, that's the biggest platform he's going to have, because he wrecked his career because he wasn't any fucking good. Abdullah, he'll be remembered. Devin Nicholson, he'll be remembered as a fucking footnote, as somebody that took advantage of a referee, as somebody that never deserved anything except hatred and scorn. And hopefully, if he did win that money, and if he actually got some money, that maybe he decides to save it, because he ain't going to be able to ever get in wrestling again. He ain't ever going to be able to get into acting. I mean, God, anybody that hires this goddamn guy that takes advantage of somebody like that, no, you sign your own goddamn death warrant. You're inviting a lawsuit. So yeah, Devin Hannibal Nicholson, yeah, he's a fucking douchebag. As for Abdullah, he'll be remembered, and Devin won't. So, agree, disagree, what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.